Hello and welcome to Command Line Interface with Terminus. My name is David. I'm very happy to be here today to share a little bit about what Terminus means, how to use it, how to get started with it, and hopefully to inspire you with some ideas of how to use it down the road as well. Terminus is basically the way that you can interact with Pantheon directly from your computer without having to open a browser, without having to go into your dashboard directly. Anything that you can do in the dashboard, you can do directly from Terminus, and it's frequently a little bit faster. And by doing it in Terminus, you're able to also kind of take a stab at automation. You can start scripting out those sorts of commands that you might do on a regular basis. But before we actually jump into it, let's go through some housekeeping things first. Let me begin with an introduction. Hello again. My name is David Needham. I'm a developer advocate at Pantheon, where I spend the majority of my time working on educational material, training workshops just like this one, and sometimes public speaking, and hopefully public speaking in person when things open back up again. Now, I come from an agency background. I've been doing Drupal and WordPress for about over 10 years now. And all of my experience and stories that I'll be sharing are probably being pulled in from my experience working with customers, working at an agency alongside other developers and other project managers and people like that to build websites for the people that hired us. However, the things that we cover throughout the workshop are really super relevant to just about everyone. So hopefully this will be really interesting for you. Now, there are many ways you can participate. We are live right now on a few different platforms. We are, of course, live on Zoom. Hello to people that are in the Zoom. Feel free to introduce yourself if you'd like in the little chat window. We are also live streaming right now to both YouTube and Facebook. So hello, streaming platforms as well. Now, for all of you, if you want to participate, if you want to make this workshop a little bit more interesting for me, and also hopefully a lot more contextualized to whatever it is that you're hoping to learn about here today, then please do make use of the chat. Please do interject with questions, share things as you go throughout the workshop today so that we can make this workshop a lot more useful for you. Hopefully you can get out of this what you're hoping to get out of it. Now, this is live workshop number 2, Command Line Interface with Terminus. We do this on the first Thursday of every month. We do the Getting Started with Pantheon workshop every single Thursday. So come back at noon Central Time any week, and you'll be able to attend that workshop if you have not yet seen it. In that workshop, we go through the basic workflow using Pantheon, as well as WebOps, and explain exactly what WebOps means, and in practice, how to get the most out of it. On the second Thursday, so next week, we'll be going through Quicksilver. Quicksilver is a tool that allows you to run scripts before and after any workflow in Pantheon, which means you can set up things like Slack notifications when things happen in the dashboard. You can set up automated tests, or really integrate your Pantheon experience with any third-party API that you might already be using for other systems. On the third Thursday, we go through all sorts of performance topics. We talk about how to keep your website fast on Pantheon, how to debug problems with performance, and then monitor your performance over time with New Relic. And then we wrap up the month on the fourth Thursday by going over some going live best practices. It's really a short presentation about the things that you need to go live on Pantheon. And then we try to prioritize questions and concerns and really do everything we can to help anyone who might have concerns or questions about going live on Pantheon and really help them to launch as quickly as they can. If you're interested in any of these workshops, you can always go to pantheon.io/live-workshops to get on the list and to get reminders sent to you about when those events happen. All right, so Pantheon is a website operations platform. And if you're curious about WebOps, the workshop that we just covered, the one every Thursday, is the one that you should probably attend. But Terminus, the tool we're going to be talking about here today, is one of the agile tools that is possible that really helps make WebOps even a more valuable thing. Terminus itself is something you run on your computer in the command line interface, specifically for running commands and integrating and connecting directly to Pantheon. I do see we have a question or a chat. John here is interested in cloning sites on the platform. They have a Drupal site that has all the modules, theme, and configuration you want. You want to start my next build with this existing code, files, and database, kind of like a blueprint. Yes, I love that. Hoping I can learn an easy way to do this with Terminus. I have great news for you. there is an extremely easy way to do this with Terminus. We will take a look at that closer to the end of the workshop, but there is a plugin that is made specifically for this purpose that goes right into Terminus and makes it easy with just a simple command. So yes, we will get to that in just a minute. Thank you for posting something, by the way. Again, it makes it a lot more interesting when someone is actually communicating versus me just talking into the void. So when you're looking at a Terminus command, it will typically consist of the word Terminus followed by the command : subcommand. And then typically there's going to be an environment or the site that you're interacting with, followed by a period and the environment that you're interacting with. So each command will be a little bit different. Sometimes you need to, give information relative to the entire site, not really caring about the environment. And sometimes you need to put in a dev, test, or live, or whatever your multi-dev environment name is to get that specific. If you're ever not sure what a command does or what options are available, you can always throw in a -h, which will give you help information about that particular command. And then if you're not sure what commands are possible, you can always type in Terminus list. I see another question coming in through the chat. Will you cover installation of Terminus as well? No, unfortunately, installation is one of those things where we have a couple different options. I'll show you the doc where we go through steps for installing, but depending on if you're on Windows or Linux or Mac or what version of Windows, sometimes it might be a little bit different. So rather than cover it the way that I can do it on my Mac right now, we kind of skip over that, unfortunately, and let the docs do that work. But I will be sharing that with you a little bit later. So we have here, this information. Let's go into a quick demonstration. So I have flipped over now to my command line interface. It's called Applesauce. And if I'm trying, let's say, to interact with our Pantheon weekly demo site, and I would like to write a script sometime that involves something to do with my CMS. I know that the website is in Drupal 8, but I have other websites that I'm going to be interacting with that are in WordPress or Drupal 9 or something else entirely. And it's important that my script differentiate between one from the other. So if I would like to figure out how to get at that, how can I differentiate between a Drupal site and a WordPress website using Terminus, I might start just by doing a Terminus list. This is going to return all of the commands that are possible with Terminus. And if I go, kind of scroll through here, I can see that there is, eventually I'd come across this site info, which is going to display all the information about any given site. So if I come in here and I do Terminus, if I spell it right, Terminus site : info, and then followed by the name of the site, Pantheon weekly demo site, then we'll get information about it. We'll get the UUID for the site specifically. We'll get the label, which is a human readable name, the actual name, which is the machine readable name, the date it was created, what tier it's on, performance medium, number of multi-devs, what upstream it's being pulled in from, which can be really helpful. If it is associated with an org, that's information here. But the one that we care about for our particular scenario is framework. In this case, the framework is Drupal 8. So if I want to get at that, I could certainly return this command, this Terminus site info command, and then parse this reply to pull out, framework Drupal 8, and then I'll have Drupal 8. So this is the data I want. The problem is that it's kind of tedious to have to dig through all of this data and parse out exactly and just grab this particular piece. So let's see if there's an easier way to do this. If we do a Terminus site : info and then a -h, we'll get help for this command. And we can actually read, well, it's expecting the site name, which we gave, so that's good. We can change the format. The default is table, which is what we saw up there. Another format like a CSV or JSON, those could be a lot easier for us to get access to. We could parse a JSON response or a YAML response or something like that way easier than a table. So one option would be to change the format to one of these other things that would be easier that we could actually interact with. But if we keep going, we actually see there might be an easier way. If we look at the fields, we can see that, by default, it's showing all the fields, really. But we can specify that, or even further, we can specify just one field, and all it returns is a string of the response. So this is actually going to do exactly what we want. So if we say Terminus site site:info, and then field equals framework, because again, framework was the name of that particular field. And then we say Pantheon weekly demo site. Then it returns just the framework, just the piece of information we want. So what we would do, we're kind of thinking out loud a little bit, we'd probably take this, assign it a variable, or make a variable equal, framework equals Drupal 8, and then we could use a switch or some sort of a function to say, if this is Drupal 8, maybe we use Drush. If it's WordPress, maybe we use WP-CLI, and we write the script out to be generic enough that we could reuse it on every site we're working with, but specific enough to get the work done that we actually need it to do. So that's just in a quick example. So we're going to go into another example now. So we're going to be going through a series of slides where we're looking at the Pantheon dashboard, followed by the command line interface. It's going to be an example of like, here's how you do something in the dashboard. Here's how you do something in Terminus. The point of this is not going to be helping you memorize the commands or even really see what's possible. We're going to be flipping through these slides relatively quickly just to show the process of what you might do to create a website on Pantheon. And we're going to compare doing it with the dashboard versus doing it directly from the command line. So let's move forward. So in order to kind of get the list of all the sites that you're looking at, you might open up your dashboard. You'll see all your sites right there. Well, with Terminus site list, you can do that as well. Next, we're going to create our site. So you go into the dashboard, you go to create site, you kind of go through those steps. We can do all of that with a single Terminus command as well, Terminus site create, and then we just tell it the information, the machine readable, human readable name, and then the framework or the upstream that we're pulling it from. In this case, we're creating a WordPress website. So next, let's say the containers get all spun up, the environments are all ready to go. We now need to actually install WordPress. So we open up the dashboard or the dev environment. We have this prompt, but we could do all of this with the command line interface as well, because we have WP-CLI. Now, WP-CLI is something that you would install locally on your computer typically, and it allows you to interact directly with WordPress websites from your command line interface. This is not a Pantheon thing. This is a WordPress community thing. And this comes pre-installed on every environment on Pantheon. So rather than having to install it locally, all you have to do is do Terminus WP, followed by the name of the site, dot the environment that you want to run the command on, and then the dash dash. Now, the dash dash right here is actually important because it separates the Terminus command. Everything before is the Terminus command, and then everything after the dash dash is the WP-CLI command. So if you go out and Google WP-CLI commands and kind of look up and find something that you want to run on your site, you would put that in here after the dash dash. And this is just to differentiate, again, between Terminus and WP-CLI. There are some backslashes in here. Unfortunately, those are just to show where the line break happens. If you paste this code in directly, it will still function properly. The line breaks are simply there because I want this to be readable for everyone. So I made it big text on my screen, but the command is very long. And so it's going to wrap as I do that. So this is our way to do that. You can ignore, you can leave out the backslashes if you don't want them when you type this out. But again, we're not doing this to help you memorize this necessarily. We're just going to keep going. Well, actually, so before I go real quick, WP-CLI, WordPress, I mentioned, it lets you connect directly. We also have access to Drush, the Drupal shell, which is also, it's basically the same thing as WP-CLI, but for Drupal. So if you just do a Terminus Drush, and then the rest of it, it's all going to be pretty much the same. All right, so development best practices on Pantheon say that we next need to create a multi-dev environment. We do all of our work in a multi-dev, so we'll do that through the dashboard. We could also do that through Terminus. We next want to enable SFTP to make it possible to change code. We can do that through here. We want to start adding in our plugins or our modules or whatever we're going to add into our site. Well, we can start doing that with WP-CLI and Drush. And again, this is just to emphasize that, if you are working in Drupal, if you're not doing any WordPress stuff, the Drush command is basically the same thing. Terminus Drush, your name of your site, dot your environment, dash dash, and then a standard Drush command. All right, next we have deployment. We're ready to actually get our changes deployed up to our website. So we do a Terminus deploy, we get it all up there. The checkboxes and the command prompt that you see in the dashboard are all represented right here. All right, so next we are Thinking about configuration management. So in Drupal, configuration management is very easy because as of Drupal 8 and above, it's all built into Drupal core. You can export configuration in your dev environment or wherever it is that you're building out your functionality, and you can save it in code, commit it just like all of your other code, and then deploy that along the way, importing it to your test environment, importing it to your live environment, keeping you from having to redo that work over and over again. This is huge. It's really, really powerful. WordPress has something very similar. It's not built within WordPress core, but the WP-CFM plugin, WordPress Configuration Management, allows you to take some of the configuration that would happen in a WordPress website, export it into code, and then again, re-import that into your live site, keeping you from having to overwrite the live database or otherwise rebuild the functionality. It does get a little bit tricky with page builders though, so that's another gotcha. But the point is, we're using configuration management, so you can do that with Terminus as well because it's just a simple drush command. Next, we're going to clear our cache. That's pretty simple with Terminus. We're going to set up our backup schedule. Maybe we actually want to download a particular backup so we can set up our local environment. Well, we can do that with a backup get. We can even say element equals DB to show we just want the database. We don't care about the code or the files directory. And then as we're preparing to launch our website, there are some things we want to do to kind of get it ready to go live. So we might enable New Relic Pro, which we can do with that command. We're going to set up Redis, which we can do through the dashboard, or we could do from here. And again, there are a few steps that are skipped just out of wanting to keep it kind of moving along. And there might be other steps that you can imagine that you would want along the way. Now, this kind of lines up fairly close to the example that John was asking about in the chat. But you can imagine a case where, I don't want to ever have to build the same website twice. I want to build it once, and then I want to let the robots do all that hard work for me and just focus on, show me the website when it's ready to go with all of my starting point and all of that stuff all set up. Well, once you realize that you can do all these commands with Terminus, it's pretty easy to turn those into a bash script or something that you can run locally to automate that tedious process. So the example that we're talking about here is, we're building a website. And that was an example that I did early on back when I was working at an agency. I didn't want to have to reinstall my modules that I used on every single project and the themes that I used on every single project. So initially, I created a script that ran through step-by-step running Drush commands to do that for me. Another example was, I would frequently start my workday by taking a database of the live version of the website I'm working on, downloading the database locally, and importing it into my local database. I think it was back then, I think it was MAMP. There's lots of better options now, but MAMP was the thing back then. And it wasn't hard, but it took minutes every day, sometimes multiple times per day to get that all synced up. And so what I found was that if I didn't have to actually open up Pantheon, if I didn't have to actually go in and click the buttons and wait for it, if I could instead run Terminus commands one by one, it would save a little bit of time overall. But then I realized, why am I running individual Terminus commands when I can just turn this into a function or a little bash script? And then whenever I want to do it, I run a single command that automatically goes out and does all the steps to backup, download the backup, and import my database into my local environment. And that was a huge improvement for my quality of life. It meant that I didn't have to think about those steps. I didn't have to remember those steps. I didn't have to spend minutes every day doing it. And over time, over the course of years, those minutes really start to add up. Also, less error prone. I would frequently make mistakes along the way. I'd forget something. So that's another reason for automation. It makes that whole process a little bit easier. Taking this to the next level, going beyond a simple bash script, you could do things like write a script that runs Terminus commands that you then move over to some sort of a continuous integration process. Like an advanced scenario might be, maybe you have a script over on Circle CI that is waiting for an API call to run that goes through this step to set up a website in response to a form being filled out on your website. So maybe, imagine you have a marketing version of your website, you're an agency, and whenever a customer is filling out the form to start a project, It takes all the information that they provide in the forum. It sends all that through an API over to CircleCI. It runs a Terminus script that not only builds the website, but also fills in the personal information, not personal, but like the information from the project information into the website. So it's all pre-filled. And then by the time the salesperson or whomever replies to that email is ready to actually reply, they already have a starting point. They already have a website that has a bunch of those things already done so that they can quickly, follow up. They can show, the site as it's, been built so far and give them a great starting point for the development team to jump on in and get going. It's so cool. There's so many options when you think about automation and scripting. But let's, again, take a step back. Let's take a look at the Terminus Manual, which is where we'll get all sorts of additional information about Terminus. Let me grab the link for this to make it convenient for you to jump on in. I'm also going to be stepping through this together, so feel free to just watch my screen if you'd prefer that. There we go. So this is the Terminus Manual. There's all sorts of great information in here. I'm going to start with the install section on the side. Again, there are a couple different ways that you can install Terminus. The way that I just did, I recently just got a replacement computer, so I just went through this process. I followed the steps down here. I just did these one by one, and that set it up for me. Now, there are things to know, like this is sort of assuming a Linux or Mac process. It is absolutely possible to install Terminus on Windows, particularly in Windows 10 with the Windows kind of Linux subsystem thing. However, it can be a little bit tricky sometimes to get that set up. In those cases, at the very, very bottom, we have some troubleshooting tips. Whenever we've run this class in person, or not this class, but a class that involves Terminus, whenever we've run it in person, we'll have a classroom full of people, half the room or more are running Windows machines. Some of them will end up with problems, but all of them have been addressed through the troubleshooting steps here at the bottom. And we are improving this over time as well. So if you are having any sort of trouble getting set up with Terminus, check out the troubleshooting steps at the bottom, and the errors, the problems should be mentioned down here. If they are not, you can absolutely ask the Pantheon community or Pantheon support directly, and we will absolutely help you with that. And we'll have information about that and links to get help at the end. There's an example usage page, which goes through, frankly, a lot of the stuff that I talked about here in this call. We also have a command reference guide, which is really helpful if maybe the -H command is a little bit intimidating. Maybe if you're pretty new to the command line interface in general, coming in here can be a lot more useful. Also, if you come in here and you find something that you're interested in checking out, you can click it and get even more information, and then share this with friends or other people that might need information about the particular command. There is also a scripting section. If you are brand new to scripting and the ideas that I shared earlier are sort of interesting to you, there is an example bash script in here. Though honestly, when I first got started creating bash scripts, this code probably would have intimidated me a little bit. I didn't understand exactly the syntax and how these things work. When I first got started, I simply opened up my bash RC, or nowadays, like if you're using ZSH, ZSH RC file, and you can just create a function. You can just go in there, create a function or an alias. You can list out a list of Terminus commands directly in there, and that served me well for a very long time. If you're wanting more advanced options, there's the Pantheon example Terminus auto update script, which is kind of a mouthful, but this will show you exactly how to set up a rather complex Terminus script that runs on CircleCI. This is also a great introduction to automated testing because it does incorporate some automated testing in that script as well. The script is not formally supported anymore because we have this functionality built into Pantheon itself, into the dashboard with our new autopilot feature that's coming out in July, so just next month. So we're not officially supporting the script anymore. Last time I tried it, it worked fine, but your mileage may vary. And then we have another script here for WordPress and Composer. So we also have a section here for plugins, and in particular, the one that I talk about every single time is my favorite plugin, the site clone plugin. So John, this is the one that you're going to be looking for here. If you come down here to the site clone plugin, it says it allows you to copy code, database, and files from one Pantheon dashboard to the other. Not mentioned here, but it also includes the Git history. So if you are cloning one project, you want to know that Git history or potentially roll something back later if you need to, all that information is right there. Now, I use this one most frequently because I run a lot of classes kind of like this. I help set up classrooms for community trainers and some professors in higher ed. And in those cases, I need to clone an entire classroom versus websites, an entire classroom of websites that are based on the starting point that the instructor has defined. So I'll get site clone. There's another script that's not actually a plugin here that kind of sits on top of it. I think it's like mass site clone or something like that, which says, pass in the original site, pass in the org that they should go inside of, and then it will use the site clone command to just duplicate and create however many sites that I need to create off of that, which again is really helpful for setting up a classroom. But yeah, it's really good for people that want to do exactly what John was talking about and want to set up just that one perfect starting point for a website, the template site, and then with a button click or with a single command, clone that off and spin up your own version from there. Now, one of my other favorite ones in here is a Build Tools plugin. It is an incredibly powerful but rather complex plugin that allows you to create a relationship, a workflow between a website that is managed in GitHub or some other Git repository that is built with Composer and compiled with some sort of CI process like GitHub Actions or Circle CI or something, and then pushes that built artifact over to Pantheon. It can do some other things as well for these sort of advanced automation or advanced workflows, but that's sort of the gist. The agencies, the organizations that kind of get the most out of the Build Tools plugin prefer their developers to work directly in GitHub or Bitbucket or GitLab to use pull requests and things like that in those platforms, and then have the result end up over on Pantheon. And in that case, the Build Tools plugin makes that connection really, really fast. Rather than having to set up that relationship manually, you run a couple commands and you're good to go. There's, of course, a lot of other plugins here that are really useful. You can read the descriptions if you want to dig deeper and learn about those. You can also create your own plugins. So if you wanted to, maybe you have a team, maybe some of them, you want to make it really easy for other people on your team to run a particular operation more than once, you could create your own plugin that adds a custom command to Terminus so that you then could make it easier for everyone. Now, if you feel like it's something that other people would benefit from, we would love to see your contributed plugins. Maybe we'd even add it to the directory. You see some of them in here are not Pantheon official, meaning they've been contributed by people in the community. And so you'd be able to maybe get your plugin on this list as well. All right, well, that brings us to the end of the workshop. We're right at about the 30-minute mark, and we'd like to take about 30 minutes of lecture and demo and stuff like that. So we have plenty of time to actually go through questions and things like that. So I'm sharing the More Resources link, and I'm going to talk through this page, hopefully while you're formulating your questions and posting them directly into the chat. So we try to format this so that you can always watch a recording. So you get the last time that we gave this recording. It's all right here for you to watch. Further down the page, we have a section for feedback. I would greatly appreciate feedback because, as I mentioned at the beginning, the majority of what I do here at Pantheon revolves around education and specifically improving our workshops, just like this one. So I'm constantly responding to feedback with improvements to our deck, to our demos, to how we talk about different things. So if there's anything at all that we can improve about this workshop, please let us know through the feedback form. If there's anything that was particularly good about the workshop, that's also really important. We are evaluating the usefulness of this format of training, and we're thinking about trying something else. So if this worked well for you, please let us know. If you have ideas for other formats or other things that we should try, that would also be really valuable, and I'd greatly appreciate hearing it. Also, if you just enjoyed my presentation, if you feel like I did a good job, that's also really good for folks to know, for stats and all that stuff. All right, there's some links here for resources. Now, if you want to go through the steps, not quite the same thing that I showed you with creating a WordPress website from scratch, you can actually go through one of these other guides. There's one for WordPress, there's one for Drupal 8, and these will take you through step-by-step how to use Terminus and Drush, or Terminus and WP-CLI, to create a website from scratch on Pantheon. So these are both really useful ways to learn about Terminus as you're going. So I recommend them for anyone starting out. And then there are lots of ways to keep learning after today. So we have a forum dedicated to this class. If you have questions about this class later that you want to follow up with, you can go through here, discuss this class and ask questions. That would also be a great place to share any problems or questions that you have related to custom plugins, or if you want to share plugins and get feedback from people, that would be a wonderful place to put that information. We do also have a community made up of the forum, as well as literally thousands of people on Slack who hang out and welcome people. They're very friendly community. So if you're not already in our community, please consider joining. If you have a problem with Pantheon or with installing Terminus or something like that, you can definitely come to Pantheon support. You just click the support tab through your Pantheon dashboard. Every Wednesday, we have Pantheon office hours. So it is a time where every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Central Time, we do our best to answer as many questions as we can in the hour. So we'll go round robin around the room, give everyone a chance to get help with something, and then we'll just keep doing that over and over until we run out of questions or we run out of time. So that would also be a great place to get debugging help with installing Terminus or with creating a custom plugin or something like that. And then last but not least, if you want other training, maybe other topics that aren't mentioned on the live workshops page, or if you want a private training for you or someone on your team, you can go through the training resources slide here to get more information about what options are available. Also, if you prefer other formats for training, we have guides that you can print out or interact with directly. We have recordings, whatever your preference is, however you learn best, go through this more training resources slide and we might have some options available for you. All right, and with that, I'm not seeing anyone else leave any questions or anything like that. So I think I'm going to wrap it up. So thank you all very much for attending the workshop today. I genuinely hope it was useful. I hope you learned something and are able to take something away from this and go and run with it and do some exciting things on Pantheon. If you do have any follow-up, don't hesitate to reach out. I'm always happy to help. And I hope to see you around the community. I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.